The emergency klaxons screamed through the halls of the Galactic High Command like wounded animals. The room, once a space of elegance and calm, was now flooded with red warning lights that painted the faces of the 12 most powerful beings in known space. Their collective gaze was fixed on the holographic display that hovered before them, showing their worst nightmare come to life. "Tell me this is some kind of sick joke," hissed Supreme Admiral Vexthora. Her 6 eyes blinked in rapid succession as her serpentine body coiled tighter around her command chair, the tension palpable in the air. She watched in disbelief as human warships, led by a man she had personally rejected, tore through the alien fleet's outer defenses. "Tell me that pathetic bottom-feeding species did not just obliterate our entire Third Fleet." The Council was silent for a moment as the situation unfolded before them. General Krexver, a veteran insectoid warrior who had conquered 17 star systems, nervously manipulated the tactical display. His usually confident mandibles clicked with unease, his claws hovering above the holographic interface. "The reports are confirmed," Krexver's voice trembled. "Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Expeditionary Force has destroyed 67 of our capital ships in the last 48 hours. A collective gasp filled the room. Admiral Zool Nex, the crystalline being whose body usually glowed with sharp confidence, now flickered dimly like a star losing its shine. "Kane," she stammered, her voice betraying disbelief. "Are you absolutely certain we are talking about the same? Miserable excuse for a sentient being." Vexthora's tail lashed violently against her chair, frustration boiling over. "See, Kane," she murmured, her voice barely more than a growl. She leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. "The same Kane who was rejected by every single one of us, the same human who—" "Yes," General Morkes interrupted with a harsh, metallic laugh. "The one we all passed on during the draft because he was too incompetent to serve. The one who was too stupid to follow basic military protocol." Vexthora stiffened at the reminder, her claws twitching in annoyance. "Do not remind me," she hissed, her tail jerking sharply. "I personally reviewed his application. I thought he was unfit for anything but the most basic of tasks. The fool suggested using unconventional maneuvers during his interview." "Unconventional," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Unconventional," Kess snorted. "He called it creative tactics during the interview. I remember laughing at it then." Vexthora's voice grew tight with anger. "I personally rejected him. I thought he meant he didn't understand proper formation flying. His psychological profile, too. It's a disaster. Unstable, insubordinate, and refuses to adhere to established combat doctrine. His file screamed liability, and yet—" She stared at the display, the truth of their mistake becoming clearer with every passing second. "And now this liability is commanding the most terrifying fleet any of us have ever encountered." The chamber fell into a stunned silence. Defense Minister Elthar, the ancient amphibian, spoke through his breathing apparatus, his voice wheezing with disbelief. "It's true. According to the intelligence reports, Marcus Kane, this rejected human, has been systematically destroying fleets far superior in number, technology, and experience. How? How is this possible?" General Krexver's voice faltered as he added, "He should have surrendered or been destroyed by our forces on Proxima Relay, but somehow he turned the tide. The asteroid field, he used it to his advantage." His insectoid eyes seemed to glaze over, and for the first time in his life, Krexver was uncertain. "We thought it was luck, but now it's clear, Kane has become unstoppable." Supreme Admiral Vexthora stood, her towering form casting a long shadow across the room. She looked down at the tactical display, her face a mask of disbelief. "The human we rejected for being too incompetent has now become the single greatest threat to galactic stability in recorded history." She paced slowly, the weight of their collective failure sinking in. "How did we miss this?" she whispered, her tone laden with frustration. "We rejected him because he didn't fit our expectations, because he didn't play by our rules." And yet, despite their certainty, despite their judgment, Marcus Kane had become the wild card, the one they could not control, and the one they could no longer ignore. The galaxy was changing, and the human they had all dismissed had become its most powerful force. Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Hellhound, his flagship, watching the holographic map of the battle unfold before him. His hands were folded behind his back, the cool light of the strategic display flickering against his face. To anyone who didn't know him, he might have seemed calm, almost detached, but those who had served under him knew the truth. Kane was always thinking, always planning. The latest victory had come at Proxima Relay, where his fleet had faced an enemy fleet that outnumbered them 3-1. It was a battle that should have been lost, a battle that, by every textbook definition, was unwinnable. But Marcus Kane wasn't concerned with the old rules. He believed in the power of the unexpected. He believed in breaking away from the conventional. It was a concept that had led him to this moment, leading a fleet of human warships against the combined might of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, all of them underestimating him. Kane's warships, though fewer in number, were led by a commander who understood not just military tactics, but psychology. He knew how the enemy thought, how they acted under pressure. He could predict their every move and then shatter their expectations. His first officer, Captain Alara, a brilliant strategist in her own right, stepped up beside him, her brow furrowed with concern. "Admiral, we've broken through their defenses, but we've sustained heavy damage. We need to fall back and regroup. The odds are not in our favor." Kane's gaze remained fixed on the screen, but his voice was steady. "We're not falling back," he replied, his tone unwavering. "We're going to keep pushing. They're already on the run." Alara hesitated, her voice softening with caution. "Sir, we're risking everything. We don't have the resources to continue this engagement at this scale." Kane turned to her, his dark eyes intense. "We don't win wars by playing it safe. We win by exploiting their weaknesses, and right now their weakness is their overconfidence. They think they've already won. Let's show them how wrong they are." The moment was tense, but Alara understood. The humans who had been rejected by every species in the galaxy, the humans who had been deemed expendable waste, were now fighting for their place in the universe. And Marcus Kane wasn't going to let them down. The orders were given, and Kane's fleet surged forward once again, carving through the enemy forces like a predator stalking its prey. The alien warships, caught off guard by the human maneuvering, fell into disarray. Kane had turned their own tactics against them, using the asteroid belt as cover, drawing them into a trap they never saw coming. The battle raged on, but in the end it was over in mere hours. The enemy fleet, which had once been so sure of victory, was now in retreat. Kane's ships had taken minimal casualties, while the aliens lost 25 of their most powerful vessels. As the battle ended and the final enemy ships fled into the void, a silence fell across the command deck. The crew, for the first time in years, exhaled collectively, the pressure lifting from their shoulders. Captain Alara stepped forward, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "We did it, sir. We won, and we did it with style." Kane's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no triumph in his eyes. Not yet. "We win because we're better, not because we're stronger, but because we outthink them." He looked out at the vastness of space. The galaxy was changing, and Marcus Kane was going to make sure humanity had a seat at the table. Later, the news spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The Hellhound's victory at Proxima Relay became a topic of hushed conversation among the alien military leaders, the first of many victories for the human fleet. The Galactic High Command, once so sure of their superiority, were now faced with the reality of a growing threat. Even those who had mocked him, those who had rejected him so decisively, couldn't ignore the human fleet's capabilities any longer. It was undeniable now. Marcus Kane had turned the impossible into reality. His unconventional strategies were not just working, they were dismantling the foundations of the established galactic order. Admiral Zulnex, once so certain that the human species was nothing more than a nuisance, stared at the reports from Proxima Relay in stunned silence. The alien fleet, superior in every metric, had been outsmarted by Kane's use of terrain, creativity, and psychology. The victory wasn't just about winning the battle, it was about a shift in perception. Humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed. Meanwhile, Kane and his crew continued their march forward, ready for whatever came next. The galaxy may have underestimated them, but that was about to change. The hum of the Hellhound's engines vibrated through the floor, a constant reminder of the incredible force humanity had just unleashed on the galaxy. The crew moved about the ship with a quiet determination. This wasn't just another victory. This was the beginning of something much larger, something no one, not even the most powerful alien minds in the galaxy, had expected. Marcus Kane stood in front of the war map on the command deck, his mind racing with strategies and potential moves. The war was just beginning, and his victory at Proxima Relay had proven something invaluable. Humanity, with its ingenuity and adaptability, had a fighting chance. He looked up from the map to find Captain Alara standing nearby, watching him with her arms crossed, a slight frown on her face. "You're planning our next move, aren't you?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen it all and knew how dangerous Kane's unorthodox methods could be. Kane gave her a small smile. "Of course, we're not done yet. We've taken down one fleet, but they're going to come at us harder next time. We need to keep pushing forward. We need to prove that we can stand on our own." Alara shook her head, her expression a mix of admiration and concern. "You know this isn't just about tactics anymore, right? You've got the attention of the entire galaxy. The High Command is going to react. We're not just fighting fleets, we're fighting an entire galactic order that's built on their belief in superiority." Kane's eyes darkened as he nodded, his thoughts already far ahead. "I know, but that's why we need to keep the pressure on. If we wait too long, they'll regroup and try to crush us. The key is to outthink them, just like we did at Proxima Relay. They'll never expect us to act so boldly." Alara gave a small, reluctant smile. "I never thought I'd see the day where I'm taking orders from a human, but I have to admit, you're playing this game better than anyone could have predicted." Kane's smile faded slightly, the weight of his responsibility settling in. "They all thought we were nothing but expendable waste. They rejected us because we didn't fit their idea of what a soldier should be, but they missed the point. They underestimated what makes humanity unique." A sudden beeping from the tactical console interrupted their conversation. Kane's eyes snapped to the screen, his heart skipping a beat. A new message had come through, marked with the highest priority. It was from Admiral Vexthora. "Fleet Admiral Kane, this is Supreme Admiral Vexthora. You are to cease your military actions immediately. Failure to comply will result in full-scale retaliation against human assets throughout the galaxy." The message was clear and the tone was icy. Vexthora had had enough of playing games. She was about to make an example of humanity. But Kane wasn't fazed. He had expected this. In fact, he'd been counting on it. He turned to Alara, his expression hardening. "It's time. We move now. We don't back down." Hours later, Kane's fleet was moving towards their next target. The High Command had expected him to retreat in the face of their threat, but Kane had no intention of giving them the satisfaction. Instead, he was going to hit them where it hurt most, at their supply lines. The Hellhound and its fleet were headed toward the Hegemony's core world, a heavily fortified planet known as 6 Primal. It was the jewel of the Hegemony's empire, a planet so fortified that its defenses were considered impervious to any attack. The perfect target. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Captain Alara asked as they neared the planet. 6 Primal is a fortress. There's no way we can engage them directly without sustaining catastrophic losses." Kane's eyes glinted with quiet determination. "We're not going to engage them head-on. That's what they expect. We're going to hit them where they're weakest." He turned to the crew, a calm fire in his voice. "I've studied them. 6 Primal may be impregnable, but it's not invulnerable. We'll bypass their defenses and go after their supply routes. Their entire military might is only as strong as their logistics. Cut that off, and the fortress is nothing but a hollow shell." Alara's brow furrowed as she processed the plan. "But their military will be spread thin. They'll never expect a strike like this." "Exactly," Kane said, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's the beauty of it. They think they're untouchable. We'll make them realize that their greatest strength is their biggest weakness." The human fleet under Kane's command moved swiftly and efficiently. Kane had learned the art of using his enemies' arrogance and pride against them. They thought they had everything under control, until they didn't. The first phase of the operation was a resounding success. Kane's ship slipped past 6 Primal's immense defense network using unorthodox stealth maneuvers, blending in with the debris field surrounding the planet. The enemy didn't see them coming. Then came the surprise. Instead of launching an all-out attack on 6 Primal's defenses, Kane had sent a small task force to infiltrate the Hegemony's critical supply lines. The ships moved undetected, cutting off communication and energy resources from key military outposts. The strike was surgical, clean, and devastating. Within hours, 6 Primal was cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The once invincible fortress world had been rendered helpless, surrounded by an enemy they had never considered. As the battle unfolded, Kane's fleet swooped in, taking out the remaining scattered defenders. The Hegemony's once dominant fleet was now fighting on multiple fronts, unable to mount an effective counterattack. Without the resources they relied on, Six Primal's defenses crumbled. By the time Vexthora and the High Command could react, it was too late. Six Primal had fallen, and the hegemony was in disarray. Kane stood on the bridge, watching as his fleet continued their campaign. His mind was already moving ahead, thinking of the next move. He had no time to celebrate. The galaxy was changing, and he had no intention of stopping now. Word of the attack spread quickly, and the reaction was immediate. The galaxy's greatest powers were in chaos, and they had only one question. How had a human, once discarded as a military failure, become the most dangerous force in space? But Marcus Kane wasn't done. His victory at Six Primal was just the beginning. The shockwaves of the Hellhound's victory at Six Primal rippled through the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the mighty hegemony, with all their advanced technology and unparalleled defenses, had been brought to its knees by a human fleet. A fleet that had once been dismissed as unfit for combat, led by a commander deemed expendable waste by the most powerful beings in the universe. As news of the victory spread, the rest of the galaxy watched in a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief. The High Command had underestimated humanity, and now Marcus Kane was proving just how disastrous that mistake had been. Back on the bridge of the Hellhound, Marcus Kane stood in front of the tactical display, his fingers lightly tapping on the armrest of his command chair. His eyes were locked on the holographic map of the galaxy, with the blinking red dots that signified enemy forces beginning to shrink, one by one. He had cut through their supply lines, crippled their strongest fleet, and struck fear into the heart of every major power. "Admiral, the reports are coming in," Alara said as she approached him, a look of grim admiration on her face. "The hegemony is scrambling. They've declared a full-scale retaliation, but their military is in chaos. Their supply chain is in tatters. Six Primal. It's no longer a threat." Kane nodded slowly, but his expression remained focused. "It's only a matter of time before the rest of them try to retaliate. We're not done yet. The galaxy's powers won't sit idly by after what we've done." Captain Alara stepped closer, her voice laced with a mix of hope and caution. "Sir, you've won. Again, the hegemony is in disarray. This could be our chance to push for peace, to negotiate. If we keep going like this, we'll provoke the entire galaxy. They're going to see us as a threat." Kane's gaze hardened. "I'm not interested in peace through submission. I'm interested in securing humanity's future. We've been given an opportunity, and we're going to make the most of it. We're not asking for peace. We're demanding respect. We've already proven we can take on their best and win. Now it's time to show them that we're here to stay." The silence in the room hung heavy for a moment before Alara spoke again. "So, what now, sir?" Kane's lips curled into a slight smile. "Now we make sure they never forget who we are." As Kane's fleet continued its operations, his reputation spread like wildfire. The galaxy was not just witnessing a military rise. They were witnessing the rise of a new power. A power led by someone who had once been rejected, who had once been written off as a failure, but who now held the galaxy in his grasp. Supreme Admiral Vexthora, once so sure of her superiority, now sat in her chamber, staring at a map of the galaxy. The walls of her office were adorned with relics of past victories, yet they now felt like relics of a bygone era. The galaxy she had once dominated was slipping from her grasp, and she knew it. "We can't let this continue," Vexthora hissed to her officers. "The human has proven himself, time and again. If we don't act now, the galaxy will belong to him." Her officers looked at each other, their hesitation palpable. "Supreme Admiral, the human is playing a game we don't understand. Every time we think we've caught him, he slips away, always one step ahead. We've lost 2 fleets in a matter of days. I don't know how much longer we can continue this war." Vexthora's eyes burned with fury. "We will continue until the human is broken. If we allow him to continue, we're nothing but failures. We cannot be seen as weak." But deep inside, even Vexthora felt the cracks beginning to form. She had once believed the High Command's judgment was infallible. They were the galaxy's greatest minds, after all. And yet, in rejecting Marcus Kane, they had made the greatest mistake of their history. Elsewhere, the galaxy's other powers were forced to react. The Silicon Confederacy, the Aquatic Union, and the Insectoid Collective, all of them watched as the human fleet surged forward, capturing systems and defeating fleets that should have been far superior in every sense. Every new victory by Kane was a hammer blow to their confidence. And now, For the first time, they were faced with the terrifying reality that a single human could reshape the galaxy. General Craigsford, a battle-hardened veteran of countless campaigns, sat in his war room staring at reports of Kane's latest actions. This human! He doesn't fight like anyone else. He doesn't follow the rules. He creates new ones. He doesn't just win battles, he breaks minds. Intelligence Director Yax-Ka nodded, her face filled with unease. He understands the psychology of war better than anyone we've encountered. Every time we think we have him cornered, he turns the situation around on us. He's playing a game that none of us are prepared for. War Chief Beck, whose species had long relied on brute force, slammed his fist on the table, a look of grim determination on his face. We can't let him succeed. If we don't stop him now, we risk losing everything. But there was one truth they could no longer deny. Marcus Kane had made himself a force that couldn't be ignored. He wasn't just a threat, he was a new era. Kane's next move was as bold as it was brilliant. Instead of consolidating his gains or securing territory, he launched an audacious attack on the heart of galactic diplomacy, the Galactic Trade Federation. Their seat of power, a massive orbital station that managed the galaxy's trade routes and resources, was now a target. With his fleet at the ready, Kane made a calculated decision to disrupt the heart of the galaxy's economic engine. This wasn't just about military conquest. This was about reshaping the very foundation of galactic power. The Trade Federation, like the High Command, had long been dismissive of humanity, but now they would feel the consequences of their arrogance. "We're going to show them that the galaxy's power structures have changed," Kane said, his voice steady, his gaze fixed on the tactical map. "They've ignored us for too long. It's time to remind them of who we are." As Kane's ships approached the Federation station, the Federation's fleet scrambled to respond. They were unprepared for the speed and precision of the human attack. Just like the High Command before them, they underestimated him. The battle was swift. The Federation's defenses were overwhelmed by Kane's ingenuity. The human fleet moved with purpose and speed, cutting through the station's defense grid and crippling its core systems. The station, once the pillar of intergalactic trade, was reduced to rubble in mere hours. When the Federation sent a diplomatic envoy to negotiate, they were met not with a show of force, but with a simple message. The galaxy will now be governed by a new order. Human oversight will be implemented across all military and trade operations. It was a declaration of a new era, and the galaxy was left to come to terms with it. The victory at the Galactic Trade Federation was a turning point. The High Command, the hegemony, the Confederacy, every power in the galaxy now understood the truth. Humanity had arrived, and Marcus Kane was its face. As Kane looked out into the stars, he knew one thing for sure: the galaxy would never be the same again. And this time, humanity was in control. Marcus Kane's victory at the Galactic Trade Federation station had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, signaling the irreversible shift in the power balance. No longer were humans the underdogs, the expendable rejects. They were the rising power, the force that every faction now feared. As humanity's newfound supremacy spread, so did the whispers of revolt, of resistance. The galaxy's most powerful beings, once confident in their own invulnerability, were beginning to realize that their era was coming to an end. But Marcus Kane wasn't satisfied. He didn't fight to conquer planets or collect trophies. He fought to reshape the entire galaxy, to break the old system and forge something new. And the old powers knew it. They knew they had only one option left to save themselves: destroy Marcus Kane before he could move any further. The war room of the Galactic High Command had never been more tense. Supreme Admiral Vexthora paced nervously, her 6 eyes darting between the star maps and her officers, who were all deep in thought. The first blow had been dealt. Kane had taken down 6 Primal and the Galactic Trade Federation. The galaxy's largest commercial hub was now under human control. But the High Command wasn't about to let one defeat lead to a chain of others. "We need to strike before he gains any more momentum," Vexthora growled, slamming her tail against the floor. "We've underestimated him long enough. No more mistakes. We are the rulers of the galaxy, and we will not let some human dictate our fate." General Craigsford, still rattled by the earlier defeats, nodded reluctantly. "We've already lost 2 fleets and 6 Primal, but we can still rally. We have the numbers. We just need to attack while Kane is still consolidating his power. If we hit him fast and hard." "We do not have the luxury of time," interrupted Vexthora. We need to cut the head off the snake. If we can take down Kane himself, his fleet will fall apart. He's a one-man operation at this point. We cannot afford another victory like Proxima Relay. The decision was made. The High Command would use their combined fleets to launch a full-scale, direct assault on Kane's flagship, the Hellhound, in the heart of human-controlled space. On the bridge of the Hellhound, Kane watched as the holographic map flickered, displaying new movements from the High Command. His crew was tense, preparing for the inevitable clash. They knew the High Command would retaliate, but Kane had already anticipated this moment. It was the test he had been waiting for. "Sir," Ilara spoke up, her voice tight, "the High Command is massing an enormous force. They're coming straight for us. We'll be outnumbered again by at least 3-1. Kane's fingers drummed steadily on the command chair. His mind was already calculating their options, analyzing their next moves. His eyes were calm, yet determined. "We're not going to fight this like they expect us to. We won't play by their rules. They'll come at us with overwhelming force, thinking we'll break. But that's exactly what they want." Ilara looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "You're not planning on taking them head-on, are you?" Kane shook his head slowly. "No, they're playing into our hands. We're going to turn their advantage into their biggest mistake." He turned toward his crew, his voice steady but full of purpose. "This is what we've been preparing for. We won't retreat. We won't back down. This is the moment that defines humanity's future." The High Command's fleet descended upon the Hellhound, the massive battle formation a symbol of their determination to end the human threat once and for all. The tension in the air was thick. On one side, the galaxy's greatest military minds. On the other, a single human commander and his ragtag fleet of rejects. Kane's fleet was a fraction of the size, but that had never been his strategy. He didn't need numbers. He needed surprise, deception, and psychological warfare. As the first wave of enemy ships moved into position, Kane activated his plan. "All ships engage stealth protocols," he ordered. The Hellhound's fleet scattered in an unexpected pattern, using decoy ships and electronic warfare to create a mirage of movement. The High Command's fleet hesitated, confused. The human fleet's movements weren't following any known patterns. It was chaos, but a calculated chaos. As the enemy ships closed in, Kane's forces launched a series of surprise attacks, striking their opponents with pinpoint precision. His ships moved like ghosts, disabling key enemy vessels before they even realized what was happening. "How is he doing this?" General Craigsvore's voice trembled as he looked at the chaotic battlefield. The High Command's once pristine military strategies were crumbling under the pressure of Kane's unpredictable tactics. The human fleet didn't just fight, they outthought their enemies at every turn. Kane's strategy wasn't just about firepower, it was about breaking the morale of the opposing forces. Every time the High Command thought they had him cornered, he slipped away, pulling them into traps, using the environment against them, exploiting their weaknesses. It was psychological warfare at its finest. The High Command's fleet began to falter, their commanders losing coordination and their tactics falling apart. As Kane's fleet continued to strike, a sense of panic spread through the enemy ranks. Supreme Admiral Vexthora, watching the chaos unfold on her command deck, could hardly believe what she was seeing. This was supposed to be the final blow. Instead, Kane had turned the tables on them. His fleet, though smaller, was outmaneuvering them at every turn. It wasn't just his tactical genius, it was his ability to predict their every move. "Admiral, we can't win this," one of her officers whispered, his voice shaky. "Their fleet is too unpredictable. We're losing control." Vexthora's eyes burned with a mix of fury and helplessness. She had underestimated Marcus Kane, and now the consequences were unfolding in real time. But there was one last option, the one that could end it all. On the Hellhound, Kane stood in front of the tactical display, his face hard with determination. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had already turned. His crew was energized, their spirits high, but he knew they couldn't let their guard down. "Now we finish this," Kane said, his voice unwavering. "Prepare for the final strike." He turned toward Ilara, who was already issuing the necessary orders. The Hellhound's fleet, having decimated the enemy forces, moved in for the kill. The High Command's flagship was within striking distance. As the final phase of the battle began, Kane's fleet launched a full assault on Vexthora's flagship. This time there would be no escape. The Hellhound's advanced weaponry tore through the enemy's defenses. Kane's ships moved with unrelenting precision, and soon Vexthora's flagship was crippled. The once proud vessel now lay in ruins, a symbol of the galaxy's arrogance shattered by a human who had once been deemed worthless. As Vexthora's flagship fell, Kane watched through the viewport, his expression cold and resolute. The High Command had been defeated, their power broken. The galaxy was changing, and Marcus Kane had just become its most powerful force. In the aftermath of the battle, Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Hellhound, staring out at the stars. He had done it. He had defeated the most powerful beings in the galaxy, but his work was far from over. Now the galaxy had to recognize humanity's place in the universe. They had made a mistake in underestimating him and humanity. Now he would show them that they had made a mistake they could never undo. "We did it," Alara said, her voice filled with quiet awe. Kane turned to her, a slight smile crossing his face. "We did, but this is just the beginning." The galaxy was about to learn what humanity could really do. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Hellhound, staring out into the black void of space, where the once mighty High Command fleet now lay in ruins. The flagship of Supreme Admiral Vexthora had been reduced to a smoldering wreck, a testament to Kane's ingenuity and the failure of the galaxy's greatest military minds. Yet as the sounds of victory echoed through the Hellhound, Kane knew that the true test was just beginning. The galaxy, it seemed, could never let go of its arrogance. The High Command had fallen, but the other factions, those who had watched from the sidelines or hesitated to act, were now preparing for the inevitable human uprising. Humanity had gone from the fringes of galactic civilization to its most feared enemy, and the powers that had once dismissed them now felt the sting of that mistake. "We've done it, sir," Captain Alara said, her voice laced with both awe and weariness. "The High Command is in disarray. Their fleets have been shattered and their leadership has crumbled. The galaxy's top powers are scrambling to respond." Kane turned from the viewport, his eyes scanning the faces of his crew. The battle had been won, but victory alone wouldn't change the galaxy's perception of humanity. They were still seen as weak, as an afterthought. The galaxy needed to see humanity's resolve, to understand that the rise of Marcus Kane was just the beginning of a new era. "We're not done yet," Kane said, his voice calm but commanding. "The next phase begins now. We need to make sure the galaxy understands that humanity is here to stay. We need to make them fear what happens when you underestimate us." As Kane's fleet moved toward the heart of the galaxy, the other factions began to act. The hegemony, once the dominant military power, had already begun rebuilding its forces, intent on wiping out the human threat once and for all. The Silicon Confederacy, an empire of mathematical precision, was reevaluating its military doctrine in response to Kane's unconventional strategies. And the Aquatic Union, proud and ancient, was preparing to defend their home systems from what they saw as a rising tide of chaos. But for all their might, they were not prepared for Marcus Kane. Kane's next target wasn't a military base or a planet. It wasn't even an enemy fleet. His sights were set on something far more significant: the Galactic Council, the political body that governed the galaxy's trade, diplomacy, and laws. If the galaxy's powers thought they could simply rebuild and maintain their control, Kane would show them how wrong they were. The Galactic Council had long ignored humanity, dismissing them as a primitive species unworthy of influence. But Kane knew that true power didn't lie in military might alone. To truly reshape the galaxy, he needed to control its decision-making, its politics. And so, he set his eyes on the very heart of galactic governance. The Galactic Council was meeting in the heart of the capital, the monumental structure towering above the city below. Inside, the councilors from various species gathered, their debates as heated as ever. They spoke of trade routes, diplomatic treaties, and the threat of human expansion. Supreme Admiral Vexthora, her pride shattered by Kane's victory, had been demoted. She now sat in the council chamber, her eyes burning with a quiet fury. She had once been the galaxy's most powerful military mind, but now she was just another politician, another voice in the chorus of those who had failed to see the threat humanity posed. "We can no longer allow Kane's rebellion to continue," Vexthora said, her voice sharp. "If we do not act quickly, the human fleet will be beyond our reach. We need to unite, and we need to strike now." But the mood of the council had changed. The defeat at 6 Primal, the fall of the Galactic Trade Federation, and Kane's relentless push had caused cracks in the unity of the galaxy's ruling powers. Some spoke in favor of negotiating with Kane, others suggested isolating humanity diplomatically. The debate raged on, but the uncertainty was palpable. Across the room, Councillor Threx, a representative of the Silicon Confederacy, stood, his crystalline form glowing with measured certainty. "Perhaps we should consider the human perspective," he suggested. "Kane's rise isn't just a failure of military strength, it's a failure of the way we view them. Maybe it's time to stop seeing humanity as a threat and start recognizing them as a force to be reckoned with." The room fell silent. It was the first time anyone had suggested such an approach. For all their sophistication and advanced thinking, the galaxy's elite had failed to see what Marcus Kane had already understood, that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt, to innovate, and to break free from the chains of tradition. And now, Marcus Kane was about to make them all pay for their ignorance. Back on the Hellhound, Kane watched the proceedings unfold on the Galactic Council's broadcast. He had expected the resistance, the denials, the political maneuvering. But he wasn't concerned. He knew that words alone wouldn't change anything. He needed to show them the truth of humanity's power, their resolve, and their relentless will to rise. Kane had one final act to perform. The galaxy's political leaders needed a reminder, a demonstration of what would happen if they continued to underestimate humanity. "Prepare the fleet," Kane ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We're going to the heart of the galaxy. The Council is about to learn what happens when you refuse to acknowledge the power of a species." Within hours, the human fleet arrived at the capital of the Galactic Council, their warships cutting through space with the precision and coordination that had become their trademark. But this time, it wasn't just a military strike. This was a statement. As the Hellhound and its fleet positioned themselves above the council chambers, Kane sent a single, simple message to the Council. "We are not asking for your approval. We are taking what is ours." The message was clear. The galaxy had had its chance to negotiate, to reconsider, and to acknowledge humanity's place in the universe. But now Marcus Kane was done asking. The Council's response was immediate. Military ships scrambled into formation, and the galaxy's greatest powers prepared for a final confrontation. But they were too late. Kane's fleet had already executed their plan. In a single, devastating move, Kane's forces disabled the capital's defensive grid, rendering the Council's military assets useless. The message was sent across every channel, broadcasted to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity was not here to negotiate. They were here to claim their place. As the dust settled, and the galaxy's powers scrambled to deal with the new reality, Marcus Kane stood before the representatives of the Galactic Council, his voice calm and resolute. "You were wrong about us," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "You rejected us, you underestimated us, and now I am here to show you that humanity will no longer be ignored. You can either adapt to this new order or you can be left behind." The council was silent. There were no more arguments, no more debates. Kane had won. The galaxy was his, not through brute force, but through sheer will and unrelenting ingenuity. And as Marcus Kane looked out at the galaxy he had reshaped, he knew one thing: the universe had been forever changed. Humanity had risen, and nothing would ever be the same again. The cold, vast expanse of space stretched before Marcus Kane, a canvas on which he had begun to paint the future of a galaxy that had once turned its back on humanity. The battle for the galaxy was no longer about just military might. It was about control, influence, and a new order that would no longer be dictated by the old powers. Kane stood on the bridge of the Hellhound, staring out into the stars as his fleet continued its patrol of newly acquired territories. His fleet had become the most advanced, the most feared, and the most respected in the galaxy. And yet there was a quiet stillness in his heart. This wasn't just about the wars he had fought or the fleets he had defeated. This was about something greater, a shift in the very fabric of galactic civilization. The changes were coming, whether they liked it or not. The old powers, those who had once governed the galaxy with iron fists, were now forced to play by Marcus Kane's rules. The Galactic Council, once a gathering of the universe's most powerful and proud species, now served as an extension of humanity's will. Kane had made sure of that. But there was still work to be done. The galaxy had seen the rise of humanity, but it was still full of disarray, old grudges, and distrust. Kane's victory over the High Command, the hegemony, and the Galactic Trade Federation had broken their power, but the true task lay in uniting the galaxy under a single banner. a banner of equality, innovation, and above all, adaptability. Humanity's strength was their refusal to be limited by tradition, by doctrine, by the past. Admiral Kane, Captain Alara's voice broke through the silence and he turned to face her. We've received a new message from the Aquatic Union. They're requesting a meeting. They want to discuss terms of cooperation. Kane raised an eyebrow. Terms of cooperation. Alara nodded. It's clear. They've realized that they can't ignore us anymore. They're trying to avoid outright conflict, but they don't want to lose their sovereignty. Kane chuckled darkly. They will learn. No one gets to sit in the Galactic Council without contributing to the new order. It's time for the universe to understand that humanity has a vision, one that won't be stopped. The meeting with the Aquatic Union took place on a neutral space station, a place that had once been a hub for intergalactic diplomacy. The Grand Hall was vast, lined with water-filled chambers where the representatives of the Aquatic Union, tall, regal beings with shimmering skin, sat watching Kane's arrival with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The Aquatic Union had been one of the most ancient and powerful civilizations in the galaxy, but they were a species tied deeply to tradition and hierarchy. Their approach to governance was slower, more conservative, a stark contrast to humanity's revolutionary speed. Kane entered the chamber, his crew behind him, and stood before the representatives with a calm, measured gaze. There was no need for grand speeches or elaborate gestures. His mere presence was enough. We're here to ensure that the galaxy moves forward, Kane began, his voice steady. I'm not here to destroy the past, but to build a future where every species can thrive, adapt, and coexist. It's time to let go of old ways of thinking and embrace the inevitable change. The Aquatic Union's representative, a tall being named Counselor Nalrith, looked at Kane with suspicion. And what do you ask of us, Fleet Admiral Kane? You've defeated the High Command, you've shattered the Trade Federation, and now you stand at the helm of the galaxy. What will humanity's role be in this new order? Kane's eyes were unwavering. Humanity will lead, but we will not rule with an iron fist. We will guide, adapt, and evolve. Those who understand this will thrive. Those who don't will be left behind. Nalrith's gaze softened, realizing the depth of what Kane was proposing. You speak of unity, but we've seen what happens when power shifts too quickly. Wars are fought. Lives are lost. We must tread carefully even if the galaxy changes. Kane stepped forward, his voice lowering. Carefully. If you want to survive the coming era, you must embrace it. The galaxy cannot stand still. Change is inevitable, but humanity has the will, the ingenuity, and the determination to help guide the galaxy through it. You'll be stronger with us. There was a long silence before Nalrith spoke again. And what if we don't agree? Kane's eyes flashed. Then you will have to answer to the consequences, just as the High Command did. The weight of those words hung in the air. The Aquatic Union, though proud and strong, understood the stakes. They could either accept this new era, or they could resist it and face the consequences, as so many others had. After a tense silence, Counselor Nalrith nodded. We will cooperate, but you must understand, Admiral Kane, this new order must be inclusive. It must respect the diversity of the galaxy. If humanity is to lead, we will follow, but we expect to have a voice. Kane's lips curled into a small, respectful smile. Everyone will have a voice in this new era, but only those who adapt will be heard. As the negotiations ended and the Aquatic Union agreed to join the new order, Kane reflected on the significance of the moment. This was just the beginning. Humanity's rise was not about a single victory, a single battle, or a single leader. It was about the potential for something greater. A galaxy united not by fear, but by the recognition of what could be achieved when species worked together, adapting and evolving to the changing tides of history. Back aboard the Hellhound, Kane looked out at the stars again, his mind already racing toward the future. The galaxy had accepted humanity as a force to be reckoned with, but it was clear that the real challenge lay ahead. The road to peace and prosperity wouldn't be easy. There would be more battles, more resistance, and more tests of his leadership. But one thing was certain. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer up for debate. They had proven themselves. And now, under Marcus Kane's leadership, they would reshape the galaxy into something unrecognizable, a new order where adaptability, ingenuity, and compassion would lead the way. And as he watched the stars flicker in the distance, Kane knew that humanity had only just begun to fulfill its destiny. The galaxy was about to witness a new era, one where Marcus Kane, the human they once called expendable waste would guide them into the future.